Palestinian side, they gave a grim report of the kind of treatment they received. They mentioned that they were manhandled, they were abused, they were assaulted. Some of them say they were raped also by these Israeli soldiers. But on the other side, those hostages that, not really hostages, they were in the guardianship of of Hamas. They gave very positive reports. They were treated with dignity, treated with respect. Although some of them were in the tunnels underground, they didn't see daylight for a couple of days. They mentioned that the medicines were taken care of and whatever the requirements were. And they were very emotional when they were released in those Red Crescent, buses. Now, immediately after the temporary ceasefire, Israel went on the onslaught again and started to bomb whatever remained in the north of Gaza and now started in the south. They're also preventing, full-scale aid, humanitarian aid, to come through. So obviously, they have an agenda, and as we discussed previously, the agenda is to bring complete closure to Palestinians occupying Gaza because they want to move them out. And the weather is very, very cold, and diseases are going to come through. People are just complaining of various other outbreaks of pneumonia, diarrhea, and other difficult medical conditions. So this is basically the callous behavior of the Zionist government. Now I know most of the neighboring countries have been very restrictive and silent about, beside a little bit of criticism here and there. Either they're helpless, as we discussed previously, or they want to get involved because they don't want to find themselves on the receiving end. So it is clear that Israel, USA, major portion of Europe, Germany, etc., all the bigger countries who have the might of war are in support of Israel for whatever reason. So they isolated those 2 million Palestinians, and you've got a large population of people throughout the world. So what are the implications of this so-called war continuing in Gaza? Because it's a question of David and Goliath here. You have a giant fighting an ant. This is how it's related to, and the ant only has the creator of all the creation, and the help will come. So Samuel, if you do a quick analysis of the situation, and where do you see this thing going?
It's quite draining to even think about the disaster. In fact, it's more than a disaster, it's a catastrophe. The situation is as follows. Israel is fighting Hamas, even though Hamas is a creation of Israel. You'll notice that they have no intention of eliminating the PLA. No intention. These are the situation, right? Somebody just said now that as at this morning, 17,800 deaths, of which 50-60% is women and children.
So they're innocent civilians.
Innocent civilians. But casualties of war, everywhere, wherever there's war, there's always casualties. And it's always what we call the vulnerable, the weak, the infirmed. Those are always the people that get caught in the crossfire, suffer the consequences. The question that was posed to me is, why is China silent? Why is Russia silent? And why are the Arab world silent?
And yet a small country like Yemen is going boots and all.
Well, Yemen's got problems with Saudi. And the Saudis are, that's been a historical war. It's a war about land. We don't want to get into the discussion of who the Sauds were versus who the Houthis were. That's another matter on its own.
It would appear as though Saudis and UAE are powerless. They're amassing wealth, and in terms of military might, they may be compromised and they could be flattened in no time. So they don't want to worsen their situation.
Look, I think the situation is very simply, it's a complex It's a very heart-wrenching. It's got anybody with a conscience anywhere in the world will not condone, irrespective of the circumstance, the maiming, killing, murdering, butchering of innocent women, children, infirmed, aged. Nobody will agree with that. Like
Samuel, it just occurred to me, for the purposes of some of our listeners may not know the current situation in Palestine, is you have a situation, and I'm going to just reduce it to simple terms, that there's a dispute between two individuals. One guy happened to be a professional boxer, and the other individual is a little boy. And he swore at the boxer, and the boxer is now all over the place with this youngster. And you've got other able people having a look at what's happening, and this fellow is getting battered. Now, the youngster would have expected some help from some of his colleagues who are competent and would go there and either separate or take on the boxer. But in a situation like this, it's a similar situation where Hamas doesn't even have proper arms and ammunition. They're operating from the tunnels. Somewhere along the line on October the 7th, they fired a whole lot of rockets into Israel. We don't know the agenda, how that took, under what circumstances, and Israel just started to bomb indiscriminately. And they're mercilessly continuing and taking apart children and women in large numbers with the pretense of trying to target Hamas. And you just mentioned, the whole issue about Hamas, by whom it was created, etc. So we're trying to work out now that the ceasefire, is no more in place, and the bombing is continuing. You mentioned Russia, China, UAE, Saudi Arabia. These are some of the sort of countries,
Turkey.
Part of BRICS, Turkey and what have you. They're not intervening to help that little boy against this huge professional boxer. And the chap is taking a hiding, and he's almost dead, but nobody's coming to his rescue. So what we're now asking is that eventually the boy might pass out and that guy will walk away. It's a simple example, but is the objective of the Zionists to clear out Gaza and make sure they take control of the land and the people must be moved completely out there? What is the objective, or what is the agenda?
Look, the agenda...
And we can talk about why those other countries are silent, because either they're afraid or they don't want to get involved. It's none of my business.
The agenda, again, is a very complex matter, but the agenda is very clear for any person, a sane person, to see. Firstly, Israel is only a proxy or a surrogate of the USA. Right? All wars around the world, the Americans are primarily the sponsors, the architects, and the final solvers of ISIS, of Osama bin Laden's organization, I just forget the name, and so forth. Now, Hamas, in their wisdom, whether it's wisdom or not, we can't tell, they took American hostages. America's got a very clear policy. If you take American hostages, you're going to suffer the consequences. Lebanon knows very well what the Americans did in Beirut or Beirut. They even made a movie. They made a couple of movies out of it, Delta Force 1, 2, 3, and so forth. So America is saying there are American hostages there, and Israel has that no constraint. There's a lot of talk in the media, but the truth of the matter is no constraint. United Nations got no power. There are some small countries making noises. I mean, South Africa wrote to the International Council, International Criminal Court, apologies. And I said in the last show and the show previously and the show previously that that's just a lot of din, it's just a lot of noise. People will continue to be slaughtered. That does nothing.
Well, listen, our regular listener Frank mentioned that UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is more interested in COP28 and climate change.
Absolutely.
That's why both the UN and ICC are silent on Gaza because on the Ukraine war they were quick to call for the arrest of Putin and condemn Russia for taking away Ukrainian children to Russia. And then Karim Khan from the ICC went to Israel recently to meet Netanyahu at Israel's